Fortress World of the Cannibals. Before I launch into this enormous lecture sharing of info, I do extend my apology to my good friend and fellow investigator, Fanfire. Um, During my recent human waste lecture, I did neglect to credit him with some of the research and even some of the script. So, my apologies again. It is just like me, though. I do forget things as this little head of mine is so full of thoughts. In fact, this has a long history. When I was just a adolescent, my mother already had a nickname for me. Somewhat accurate, I'm afraid. It was the scatterbrained professor. Yes, I've been known to walk in public with shirts inside out, and once even a pair of shorts inside out. Well, that's me. I have forgotten about bank accounts, money, who needs money, and so on. Well, with that, let us begin with words. Of course, this will be about words, architecture, history. We have to re-examine the words we're using and see some connections. A castle, well, the definition won't surprise you, but this word bears some similarity to the word stall, castle, stall, and that connection, a little flimsy right now, will become stronger. A stall is a compartment in a stable or shed for confining or feeding a single animal. Castle and caste. A caste is a class of society, a social status or system, a caste society. And the castles belonged, of course, to the upper caste. Cattle, castle, cattle. Isn't that interesting? We have stall, castle, castle with silent T, granted. Cattle. Funny too that the word cattle um, or the cattle themselves belong to the genus Bos, which is also a European word for forest. Really, it's kind of a nasty joke there, a nasty irony, because forests, Bos, were destroyed to make room for cattle. Next, we have chattel, or is it chattel? An article of movable personal property can include cattle, can include slaves, can include human cattle. Castle, castle, and chateau. Chateau, the French word for castle. And next we have citadel, another word for fortress. Fortress itself, a permanent military stronghold, often includes a small town. And a keep, very British word. Again, another synonym for castle, or even for jail. Isn't that interesting? How can the words jail and castle be related? Well, they are. They were really the same thing in the past, as I shall argue. One more note about language. The word fort can also mean strong man. And well, this will become more important. This connection will become more important later. I advise some of my listeners to re-listen to my work because, well, this will be about an hour long, and some of the connections are not always evident in the first listen, I suspect. We'll be there here in a moment. Let's review one of the foundations of my view of history. In short, the war narrative is a joke. It's all the historical and current wars between militarized nations are fake. That's good news. But if this is true, why do fortresses, castles, and citadels exist? What real function did they serve? Before I answer that question, let me add some evidence to all the other evidence I've shared that wars are fake. This time, let's think about some of the stories told about armies attacking castles. Allegedly, during the Scottish Wars of Independence, Scottish commander Sir James Douglas, the Black Douglas, needed to infiltrate the English-held Roxburgh Castle. To surprise the enemy, he reputedly disguised 60 of his men in black cloaks and cowhides. Then they crept up to the castle walls, thus disguised, at night on their hands and feet, so they looked like roaming cattle in the fields. This ruse allowed them to scale the walls and capture the fortress by surprise. Ha 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 ha. This absurd story is accepted as authentic history. Shakespeare recycled the Black Douglas tall tale in Macbeth. In that play, the English army cut branches from the trees of Birnam Wood and carried all the branches in front of them as they marched towards Dunsinane Castle. This silly camouflage tactic was intended to deceive Macbeth's lookouts. How ridiculous. According to legend, during a prolonged siege, the Hohensalzburg fortress was running out of food. The garrison had only one bull left, cattle again. The commander ordered it painted different colors and displayed to the starving enemy at various points along the castle walls, thus tricking them into believing the fortress was so well supplied with fresh livestock that the defenders could afford to waste them. The enemies gave up and withdrew. How ridiculous. Marching a bull along castle walls and painting it and redoing that action at a different point. Well, these are some of the silly stories contrived by the liars who stuffed history full of war stories so that we wouldn't know our true history. If castles and fortresses were not really defensive structures, what were they? I believe they were prisons, barns, and corrals. Corrals. This theory was accidentally supported by Kevin Hicks of the History Squad. Let's have a listen to his interesting discovery.
There was another door. I can't find any evidence for there was another. There was another door here. I can't find any evidence for there was another portcullis. But what kind of throws me a little bit, the door is the wrong way around. As you can see, the door jamb is on the wrong side, and so is the put that great big hole there to push the beam through. It locks the door from this side, from inside the gatehouse. So hang on a second. I've got it. This could seal, this gatehouse could be sealed against people coming that way, and if they got over the walls, coming in this way, because the door jamb is there and the put lug is on the back of it. So that's an interesting point, isn't it? You can lock the door against the people who are attacking you from behind.
Very interesting. Well, just try to imagine enemies climbing over a castle wall and being locked inside because the people inside rushed out and quickly locked the door from the outside. I think that's very absurd. Um, and I leave it to your imagination to confirm that, I suppose. A far more interesting explanation is that castles were intended to keep people inside. They were prisons, barns, and corrals. For more confirmation that fortresses were not defensive structures, let's consider the infamous Bastille of Paris, France. One moment. This is an aerial view of White Castle in Wales, where um, the good gentleman was just explaining that the door here locks from the outside. What a nice space. Did anyone live here, or was this just a giant holding cell? Another view of it. Um, it does have a well and a poop chute. So people were meant to be here. But I don't see decent sleeping quarters. Who knows what was there, though, really? These towers, maybe they held sleeping quarters. I think he did say that there are floors over here, or were floors. Well, here we are, the Bastille in Paris. Famous, maybe the most famous castle, no longer around. Makes you wonder if it ever was. It's quite a behemoth. Towers so close together. Were they sleeping quarters for the prisoners, the human cattle? This is what's on the site at today. It's the column of something. It's not an obelisk, it's a column. Interesting story behind the Bastille. It was allegedly a medieval fortress and, I believe shortly later, a state prison. Now, how can these two functions coincide? Isn't that convenient? Makes you wonder. Um, it was stormed during the French Revolution and so on. Original purpose to protect the eastern edge of Paris. And yeah, it was transformed into a prison before it was destroyed by those terrible, terrible revolutionaries. No, it was destroyed by, if it existed, it was destroyed by the aristocrats. They didn't want too much evidence of their crimes left behind. Um, the Bastille is very much in the heart of Paris. I don't know why anyone would build a defensive structure inside a city, although old paintings do claim it was on the outskirts, but that's hard to believe. It's almost downtown. Really is. And this is what is standing there now. I thought it was worth sharing. This is quite a huge column. I call it an airport for airships. It has a nice, what to call that, balcony. And after it stopped being used, they planted this gilded angel on top. Appears to be landing on one foot as if to, as if to remind, they want to tell us this was a place where humans came down. Not with wings, not winged humans, no, but humans in airships. And there is certainly uh, almost guaranteed a spiraling staircase through this column, and there must have been an exit somewhere. But that's subject for other people. Others have researched this topic and made good arguments, provided good evidence for it. Now, in another part of Paris, just 6 kilometers away, stands the Chateau de Vincennes. Vincennes. This is an old sketch, supposedly dating to the 1700s. These towers have been truncated since, so they say. Yeah, it looks like a nice prison compound to me. In the center here, or in the back, is the structure called the Keep. The Keep. What do they keep there? The whole thing is really a keep, of course. Oh, here we have a modern, not so modern prison with so-called exercise yard. Is that what this was? An exercise yard for the human cattle? Perhaps. Well, allegedly, yes, we're done with the Bastille. Let's inspect, yes, the Chateau de Vincennes. Um, it also has an interesting history, quite similar to the Bastille's history. The Chateau de Vincennes originally served as both a royal residence and a military fortress. Right. As if a nation's president would live on a military base. Nonsense. But of course, keep in mind what I've explained before, that the word king, royal residence, the word king is based off or derived from the word kine, which means cattle. Kings never ruled, kings were always sacrificial humans until the modern age when they just became puppets. Puppets for the masses to adore. How ironic. Well, at the end of the 15th century, allegedly, King Louis XI gave the Chateau de Vincennes a new purpose. The keep would also serve as a prison, no longer be a royal residence. Sure, just repurpose it as a. Does that make any sense? Hmm. Not if kings were really kings, not kine. Right. Well, now we have prisoners and soldiers living with the king. Oh, yes, I forgot the key word there was also. The keep would also serve as a prison. So, yeah, prisoners and soldiers are now sharing space with the king. Of course, historians assure us that only high-profile prisoners were held there, housed at the king's request. Honestly, this is sheer mockery. And yet historians gloss over and shut their eyes or blink, let us say. Well, historians do admit that in the following century, the 16th, the sovereigns moved to a more comfortable pavilion. The sovereigns, the royals, the monarchs, they moved to a more comfortable pavilion in the southwest corner of the castle, not actually in the fortress. The keep then served only as a prison, still reserved for important figures. What does that mean? Important criminals? For example, in 1574, Henry of Navarre, the future Henry the Fourth, yes, Henry, the core of that word name is hen, a very edible bird. He was placed under house arrest for his involvement in the malcontents conspiracy with the Duke of Alençon. All this nonsense makes sense if we remember that king is code for kine and prisoners were humans reserved for sacrifice by the cannibal cult, and soldiers were the guards, the wardens, no, really the ranchers or farmers, farm hands. All right, let's go back to the slides. Slide away. Another drawing of the chateau here called the Castille Royal de Bois de Vincennes of the forest. Well, there was forest once upon a time where Paris now stands. There's a church inside this fortress and some more housing for prisoners, perhaps. Yes, we need a church because every prison needs a kitchen. Here's an actual modern prison with its, I suppose, exercise yard. This is the front view of the keep at the chateau, the Vincennes. Wonderful structure. Would serve very well as a prison. I know prisons that look like this, don't you? Um, yeah, quite magnificent for a prison. Yeah, they don't build them like that anymore. Everything has gone downhill, even prisons. Yeah, allegedly, as I said, the king lived in the keep on one of these floors. Really. And this is what it looks like inside. Stone, undecorated stone. Not even the best design, really. They've got this, I'm not sure what the name for this structure is, coming right out of the top of the fireplace. This lovely pillar has this interesting pattern on top. We'll see it again on the church, the iglesia in Spanish. The church has this design. Is it there just to remind, or as a joke for the prisoners, a joke on the prisoners that they are there in this keep until they are processed, cooked in the church? It's all connected. This is the actual king's residence, I suppose, in the new building that was apparently added later. Lovely decorations. color wooden doors, not stone everywhere. Big windows, no big windows in the keep. Yeah, this is where royalty perhaps lived. I would believe that. Here's that church with that triangle and tracery inside there. That's very close to the one on the pillar. And there it is. This is the Queen's Pavilion. There's a second one called the King's Pavilion. As if they would, as if royalty would really sleep in separate buildings. Please, it's all a joke. No, maybe this was for, nah, I won't speculate. I'm doing enough. Uh, where are we now? Afghanistan. Lovely prison here, so-called castle. Long, long wall that no human could scale from the inside. I guess it's already, at this point, it's no longer being used. No, they didn't give us cameras before they stopped uh, their heinous deeds in the open. Now it's all underground, I do believe. Well, I think maybe I should share some more slides until we get to the exercise yard. Didn't I already pass that? Yes, I did. I had something to say about it. Exercise yards in prisons and the squares inside so many of these fortresses. Not only fortresses, it's places that look like royal estates sometimes, have large squares, very open. Well, according to several old texts, stories, and historical martial arts manuals, um, these texts, manuals highlight knights exercising, conditioning, and training specifically to build their strength, stamina, and agility. Well, if, as I remind you, wars were not real, then these were not real knights, these were prisoners doing their exercises. And more than just that, they were human cattle, being forced perhaps to develop their bodies for the cannibal class. They didn't want fat or very skinny human cattle, no. So out to the exercise yard you go. Training manuals and treatises from the according to the 15th century German fencing master Hans Talhofer. He explicitly instructed knights and men at arms to train diligently outside of combat. In his fight book, he advises knights to strive for physical integrity by, quote, translation, throwing and pushing stones, memories of the myth of Sisyphus, dancing and jumping and wrestling to increase their strength and agility. Notice those exercises were not really useful for soldiers, I think. They could have done exercises more useful to fighting. But anyway, these would be good exercises for muscling up, getting beefy. According to the 24 Feats, an older Celtic and Welsh manuscript, this manuscript highlights a specific list of 24 athletic feats that warriors were expected to master. This included displays of strength like weightlifting, heavy stone throwing, leaping, swimming, and weapon practice to build, yes, in my opinion, beefy men. Old epic tales and Arthurian legends, such as Sir Gawain and Green Knight by Chrétien de Troyes, often depict knights possessing immense physical power. They wrestle, fight for hours, wield massive swords. That's good for shoulders and forearm development. Um, According to the historical manual, the Knight's Own Book of Chivalry, reputedly written in the 14th century, more likely written in a few centuries later. These texts emphasize the grueling work required to win renown. They had to do rigorous physical exercise and athletic conditioning. Yes, that's what you want your human sacrifices to do. Your human cattle, I should say. Back to the slides. Here's a fortress in somewhere in Africa near Lake Victoria, so it could be any one of three countries. Of course, Africans want to claim these castles as the work of Africans. I don't know why they're so eager to do that. There's no reason to be proud of castles, regardless of their purpose. Well, that's quite a area. It's like a big corral for cattle. Can't escape from there once you're in. Maybe there were some sleeping quarters. This one is known as the Aïjoun Castle. Perhaps it's in the Arabic region. Its real name is the Kalat Arabad. You know, why would they build a castle in the middle of nowhere? What are they defending, protecting? This looks to me in the middle of nowhere, although there's now agricultural activity around. Um, it's quite derelict. Well, I suspect, I really do, that the real war, if there was any war, we can call it that, was between the European Western aristocracy, the cannibal cult, and the native peoples of the entire world, those low-tech native peoples, indigenous peoples. And this cult arose and developed strategies for wiping out native peoples and using them as food and slaves and farming them. Brutal stuff. Well, that's the ugly history they wanted to hide. They'd rather give us the stories about various imaginary civilizations fighting each other for territory. Here we are in Rome, the castle St. Angelo, very near the Vatican. I thought it was virtually really just attached to it. It was meant to defend the Vatican or perhaps Rome, but that's what they say, of course. It looks like a good prison complex to me. Perhaps there was a watchtower in the center. They may have added something here and there. And there's your, what do they call it when you can see all the people, all your prisoners? Omni something. Excellent. Very high walls. No one could get out of that prison, not without keys and guards. There we go. Something has disappeared here. That's a doorway. Perhaps they were trying to hide something from us. You don't say. It's massive. And this is Christoph's castle in Haiti. The Haitians want credit for it. Why would you want credit for this monstrosity? Again, in the middle of nowhere, what is it supposedly defending? What was it meant to defend? Wow. I'll bet there isn't a tree there that's more than 140 years old. That's one of my theories, is that these people, the cannibal cult, deforested places so that native people had no food source, while they, the cannibal cult, raped the land of its large animals. They were carnivorous mostly. Fish, fowl, and ruminants. Here's another view. The same castle looks very different from this angle. We were just looking from this side. Now here, there is a space, a yard in the center. So the inhabitants can exercise, I suppose. This is another view, yeah, another still Christoph's citadel castle, littered with cannons and cannonballs. No cannonballs maybe in this picture, but in others. Why so many cannons and cannonballs? Well, I'm not quite sure. Maybe they were just dropped there. Obviously, there are no places for these cannons to rest and aim. This was not a place for cannons. They had some other purpose. What a curious word, too, isn't it? Cannonballs sounds so much like cannibal. The jokes they play. This is in Ethiopia. Fasil Gabi. Lovely structure. They believe, historians believe, of course, this was royal residence. I don't think so. It looks like many other prisons. Looks just like the one in France we looked at, the Chateau, the Vincennes. But of course, historians will tell you, no, different people built these things, different nations, ethnic groups. This is in Afghanistan, giant castle. This drawing allegedly from 1879, allegedly or supposedly accurate. So many homes around. Were these the homes of the aristocracy? And was this their giant farm, meat market as well? They do have to eat too. And you can, look at these old world homes and palaces. They do not have kitchens. Still in Afghanistan. I guess this is the photograph of the ruined citadel. It's huge, this long wall. And also in Afghanistan, I confused them originally because they used the same names, but this is the Herat. And they're both Herat. I don't know. Far better condition, obviously, but I think also a prison for human cattle. This is inside that citadel. I don't think this was the residence of aristocrats, the ruling class. It's too ugly and depressing. They wouldn't house themselves in such a place. Well, maybe let me check my notes, maybe going ahead of myself. I am not. We're on course. Star forts, another popular topic in the Tartarian field. This one is in Portugal. Quite quite a bit of landscaping they did around this. For what purpose? People do speculate. I have speculated. Um, and this is the heart of the Star Fortress, let's call it the corral or the castle. Perhaps this landscaping was done just to help find these places while flying in airships. I don't see any other good explanation. Um, although we are told that these structures were were put here to stop cannonballs. Yes, these because they serve as enormously thick walls. Ah, really. There's not even a road coming to this place. I don't think this is a road. It's like a cattle path at best. And anyway, this is not a gatehouse, an entrance. Where is the entrance? Perhaps, who knows? It looks like it has to be accessed aerially by, yes, airships. This is in Tunisia, the Ribat of Monastir, credited to the Abbasid Caliphate. The surroundings, I wonder. It's near the ocean, a good source of fish. This is the Spiš Castle in Slovakia. Well, it has two corrals, this large one and this smaller one. This one has like a rampart on which people could walk to access the towers, perhaps. Are these the exercise yards, or is this a place where they put wild game to keep it fresh before slaughter? Again, interesting location for a castle. What is it defending in the middle of nowhere? Well, this is where the cannibal cult, the carnivore cult, um, yeah, kept, or let's say abducted the native people and the native wildlife, kept it here. And so they built their empire by eliminating natives and large game and fish. Here we are. This is called the Great Enclosure in Zimbabwe. What a strange looking structure. It really just looks like a corral for cattle. Something was there before, perhaps housing, and the landscape bears evidence that other corrals, walls were here in the past, other buildings. But again, in the middle of nowhere, defending what? Nothing, not defending anything, offending plenty. And well, here we are in the modern age again. Maximum security and minimum security prison called the Great Green County Prison. I've neglected to record where this is. Where's Green County? But I just share it to remind us or to help us see the similarities. Walls, large walls for retaining the people inside. Another one, we don't need so much wall anymore. We have electric fences, razor wire. An impressive star castle, star fort. Not sure why there's this. Yeah, they do get creative with their structures. But I guess from inside here, if this is the watching area, and if there's rooms and apartments in these arrow-shaped points, that'll make sense. I'm not sure where this is. Again, I neglected. I don't think the location is so important. These star forts are on many continents, especially Europe and the east coast of North America. This is in Australia. The Darlinghurst Jail, now a college in Sydney. Impressive, isn't it, how they can repurpose prisons, make them colleges. Well, I've shown how more impressive estates, nearly royal estates, palace estates in the UK and North America were repurposed, turned into universities and colleges, such as Oxford College. Wasn't built to be a college. No, it was repurposed as such. Well, this one is far more humbling. This is nothing like Oxford College. But the concept is the same. Repurpose, do the reset, pull the wool over everyone's eyes. Yeah, just call this a prison. I mean, it's part of the lie. I suspect it was something much worse than a prison, as I've reiterated. Here we are in Japan. The Zakimi Castle ruins. How can they call it a castle? Well, the walls are there. Something was here, perhaps housing for the human cattle. And the design, yes, it's unique. So the Japanese want to claim it as a Japanese construction. Sure. You make a little alteration in your designs and they think it's another culture entirely. No. Sakimi Castle. Again, it's not near any city. It's not near a river. Not well, not that I can see. I haven't looked at that carefully, but again, it seems to have been built in the middle of nowhere. Perhaps, well, perhaps where the indigenous people were densely populated. This is a African prison. Some time ago, this photo, I think, was taken. Yeah, we have metal gates, metal fencing, not unlike some of the fortresses we looked at. Indeed, this, the watchtower, not a keep. I mean, now everyone is living in the wall, basically. The wall has turned into the residence, the jailhouse. Well, when I looked at this, I thought, that reminds me of the Forbidden City in Beijing, China. Holy, holy wow. There we go. It's much larger, of course, housed thousands, can house thousands of people. There's the main entrance or only entrance. Well, what if this wasn't for royalty and royal serfs and royal family members? What if this was just one giant prison with exercise yards? There is a throne room, but I've spoken about that also. Exposed it for the lie and connected it to the sacrificial king narrative. Well, the buildings here are built of wood, made of wood, but the wall, the surrounding wall, is serious stonework. And around the wall is a moat. How European is that? Um, Now, this Forbidden City is in Beijing, but the old world stone buildings, which are in Beijing, are not far away from here, and that's where the cannibal cult, the European aristocrats housed themselves. And they built this rather lovely prison complex for their human cattle. Does it seem far-fetched? Why not put your human cattle in a pretty place, put them to sleep? They have no idea what they're doing there. They think this is the whole world. They have no idea what's coming for them, what's their destiny. It's not unlike the modern world. It's pretty on the outside. All your suburbs and apartments and condos. Meanwhile, you're being milked and exploited by your masters. But you don't mind because you're living in a pretty place. It's the same pattern. Gated communities. This is a kind of gated community. Um, well, as I've explained in my lecture on the Great Walls of China, the actual human farming was done underground, under Beijing. There is an enormous secret city under Beijing. And I suspect when they wanted some of that, some of those millions or million, a few hundred or thousand, they chose and put them here, perhaps to fatten them and prepare them for their demise. Exercise yards. This is important. This happens in the cattle world too. In the last few weeks, they do have ways to quickly beef up, fatten the herd. Yeah, this imperial palace, the Forbidden City, is surrounded by a massive, what's that, like 2 mile long, 3,400 meter long wall measuring 10 meters high. It has a compacted earth core and is surfaced on both sides with specially baked cannon-proof bricks. No, maybe digging-proof bricks, prisoner-proof bricks. It features an elaborate watchtower at each of its four corners, just like a prison complex. There's an image of it. Awesome, isn't it? You would want to live there and never want to leave, never be able to leave. Well, I'm going back to my notes and back to today, our modern world, our own fortress world. We no longer live in a fortress or fortresses, or do we? Well, before I answer that question, I want to be clear that I don't think our prisons, schools, or other institutions are being used for cannibalistic purposes. No, they're used to extract energy and wealth from us. I believe the cannibal class is continuing its tradition of underground human farming to produce clean meat and blood and to avoid the risks involved in abducting us in public, as we are too many now. So the methods and the method has changed. Their ways have altered. But back to my question, do we still live in fortresses? Not quite the same ones, but I think sadly, in some ways, we seriously do live in fortresses. Most Americans, and not only Americans, voluntarily lock themselves in homes equipped with cameras and alarms. Here in Mexico, the middle and upper classes are fond of building high walls around their properties, around their homes. And they sometimes mount their walls with razor wires and cameras. We're voluntarily imprisoning ourselves. In fact, entire neighborhoods are designed to resemble prison complexes. Organic or natural patterns don't exist. We have grid, spoke and wheel, and pentagram street patterns in our cities, especially. Let me share another website. Where are you? Go. From this is creativetimereports.org. Supermax prisons, views from above. And well, we've seen similar views already. They do like their pentagrams and hexagrams. Another one, maybe it's the same. And here's a neighborhood designed in the same pattern. Are they mocking us? This could be the same one over and over. Are they mocking us? I'm afraid they are. Well, a few more thoughts on our world. Do we live in a fortress world? Well, let's not forget borders and passports. Movement is restricted. The future looks grimmer. Surveillance and 15-minute cities, 15-minute lives are either here or near. And once again, the fortress is being sold to us with the same old defensive, protective lie. Yes, it's necessary for your defense, your protection, your security, your safety. The stone fortresses and castles were built for our protection. That's the same bullshit we now hear about electronic surveillance and programmable CBDCs, aka fake money. It's always for our safety, security, and convenience. And fear persuades us to swallow this bullshit, live in fortresses, forbidden cities, and accept our reduced freedoms, reduced happiness, and reduced health. They'll tell us electronic surveillance is necessary to prevent petty crimes, while institutional crimes flourish. They'll tell us electronic tracking and less mobility is necessary to prevent a climate catastrophe, to prevent you from losing your children. Meanwhile, they fly in private jets and, well, what do their children do? They track us. And they'll tell us that internet licenses and censorship are necessary to save our children from online predators, while their online games, porn, fake news, social media, and entertainments turn our children into, yeah, things, people, creatures, criminals, morons, illiterate, lost generations. I mean, it's getting worse. It didn't just start with the internet. It's just becoming very seriously stupid now. Another sign that the prison walls are closing in on us is the noticeable reduction in air travel. It's happening mostly for economic reasons, which are, of course, being manufactured from above. Another sign, the US is suddenly full of flock cameras, a few million. And starting with the year 2027, all new cars sold in the US will have in-car surveillance tech that reports to corporations and the government, insurance companies. And let's not forget the subject of geofencing. All phones and vehicles will be tracked, and vehicles will be remotely controlled when the controllers want to control them and us. And I recently watched someone present evidence that by the year 2027, just next year, motor fuel will be laced with corn-based ethanol that will turn to sludge in the engine, forcing everyone to buy new cars equipped with surveillance and remote control tech. Yes, the walls are closing in. What should we do? Well, in China, the upper middle class, or the upper middle and middle class, is crashing and seizing to immigrate to the West. The tidal wave of Chinese students is quickly receding. Um, at the same time, citizens of the West are starting to abandon the West to live elsewhere. I am not alone. Why is this happening? Not primarily because of fear of the electronic fortress being built, but because of stress and economic hardship. Most escapees are going to Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Turkey, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Generally, the exodus is going south to places with lower costs of living and less tech. But how long can we run from the electronic fortress being built around the globe? And how long will the global economy support a comfortable life for us anywhere? You know where this is going. I believe that ultimately we'll be forced to quit civilization entirely. I see it as the only way to stop feeding the many-headed cannibal monster. Good riddance to them and the hell they created.